Good morning, students. Now, today we'll be doing chapter 4, that is Strategy of Industrialization Growth 1947 to 1990. So, here we'll be understanding what was the condition of these industries between this time period 1947 and 1990. So, let us start. See, what is the importance of industry? The first topic which you are having is why these industries and what is their need in this India. Because when we got independence, we know very well that we were relying on agriculture sector or primary sector. Then why studying this? Because industries are also important. It also provide a lot of employment opportunities. So there is some importance of industries. So let us start. So first point is importance of industry. So this plays a very important role in the growth and the development of the country. Okay. Now the first thing is epic center of economic growth. So industry serves as an epic center of economic growth because as GDP rise, there is a structural transformation in the economy. See what happens when economy goes through this structural transformation means suppose we were relying on agriculture sector in the very beginning, then structural change means there will be some change in the technology because when the industries comes, it will be changing everything. There will be changes, a lot of changes, and due to those changes, it will be good for the other sectors also because when industry sector will rise definitely the tertiary or service sector will also come into play and even these technologies because of this help of secondary sector or industrial sector there will be some machinery or innovation which will be happening and new technology will come into use in the agriculture sector also and because of that agriculture sector is going to grow. Now here the second bullet points describe that industrial sector plays a replacing this agriculture as the engine of growth. This is because unlike the agriculture, industry produces a wide range of goods which the consumer would like to consume as their income rises. See, when industrial sector will come, so what will happen? Definitely, the other players will also be other players will also come into play. Like other industries will also rise, and they are having so many different type of product which a consumer would like to buy when his income increases. Then the third point says the rise of the demand for agriculture goods consequent upon rise of income is always very modest because agriculture good like rice and wheat are the necessity of the life and have low income elasticity. So it is very clear fact that when our income rises we don't spend everything on purchase of wheat and rice because we are having just need of it simply to consume it to eat all this kind of stuff of food grains. But after that what happen when our income is left we are going to buy the different type of goods, maybe furnitures, maybe a car, maybe a motorcycle or something like that. So that's why we can say that the low income elasticity means too much of income is not in spent on this agriculture goods. Okay, most of the income is spent on articles which are of maybe some luxurious form like AC, coolers or refrigerators, televisions like that. We always try to improve our standard of life. Okay, now the second point is source of employment. So as we know this industries provide important source of employment because it is just like it is very important because see agriculture sector it is not like that every person should be involved in the agriculture sector, it cannot be done. So it has to be like somebody else will have to stand and give employment and for that industrial sector is a well known thing. So here in India, if we look at the population, it is almost 121 crore or maybe more than that. So what we can say that everybody cannot do the agriculture job. Okay, what they will have to do, maybe they'll be indulged in some other activity. Maybe some industrial activity, maybe in finance, maybe in IT sector. So there will be some different types of jobs. So this just work as a source of employment, which is a second, which was just like a second option for us at that time. After this 1951 we were relying on agriculture and when this after that when the second 5 year plan we were focusing on this industrial sector. Okay, so what happened, it was just like a source of employment for the huge population in India. Now the third point is source of mechanized means. The industries plays a very crucial role in this mechanization of the farming. Okay, so use of machine like tractor, threshers, harvester in the farming has become possible only due to the industries. So mechanism has caused a rise in the farm productivity. Okay, it's owing to the mechanism in the farming that India has succeeded in producing enough food for the most populated country in the world. So see, India is already a populated country, and because of this use of this machinery in the agriculture sector, the agriculture sector is able to produce a lot of good production has happened in terms of food grains. So because of this increase in productivity, India was able to cater the huge population to provide them with all the food grains. Now, the fourth point is impart dynamism to this growth process. So what happens? See, industry imparts dynamism to the growth process. How? In the process of industrial growth process would have been restricted to the production of food for survival. Industry has added new dimension to the human life. It has generated wave of consumerism, endless consumption of a wide variety of goods and services. See, when the growth happens, what happens? See, we cannot rely completely on agriculture. We are not going to simply eat and sit. Okay, if you are purchasing wheat, rice, that's okay, we purchase all such kind of stuff. But when your income rises, happens? We will have to spend some money on the other type of good also, which is called as consumerism. Means consumer is the kind of thing or kind of a person who is just always look to satisfy himself by purchasing more and more goods which are produced by this industrial sector, which leads to the growth process. Now the growth of civilization. Now, urbanizations in the wake of industrialization has led to the growth of civilization. People becoming conscious of their quality of life, they work hard and to achieve the higher level of education and skill. Culturally diverse society are getting closer to each other. So what is happening here is we are getting civilized. We are trying to shift to the places where we can find more industries, because also we are taking good qualification, education and skills so that we can serve in some kind of industries like that. So that is the growth of civilization. We are just trying to improve our standards. Now, infrastructure growth. See, infrastructure is what? All these roads, building, dams, transportation facility, electricity, power generation. This is all infrastructure which we need in our country to improve the industrialization. So it has led to the industrialization growth also. So how this infrastructure's growth depends. See, industries tend to expand all across the part of the industry. As it spreads, there is expansion of infrastructural facility, commonly used as a facility by industrial entrepreneurs, such as means of transport and communication, banking, insurance, power service, and like. So all this one, transport, communication, banking, insurance, service, power, electricity, when these things come, when your industries are there in the country, once you are establishing the industries, what happen? Then definitely infrastructure will also be improved. The connectivity has to be developed. You will have to provide them with power generation, electricity. So all these banking facility, insurance facility, they will come into use only when the industry will be there. If there are no industry, then what is the need of bank, what is the need of insurance? Okay, so that is the thing. When industrialization happens, when companies will be there, definitely the infrastructure will also grow. Now, second point is industrialization, a sine qua non growth. Means sine qua non of growth means what? Hand in hand. Means growth process and industrialization are so related to each other that the industrialization is often taken as a sine qua non growth. Means both go hand in hand. If industrialization happens, then growth will also be happening. So at the same point of time, they go hand in hand. That is called as industrialization. Now, the factor necessitating direct participation of the state public sector in the industrialization development. Now, let us discuss this. Now, in this factor, this simply tells us that what was the need of the state, means the government, to directly interfere in this participation of the private players, because they were at that time after 1951. What happened? The government was entirely relying upon the public sector. So what was the thinking of the government? That everything should be in the control of the government, and government will be alone will be able to bring the growth and welfare for India. So all the important sector in India are were there in the hands of the all these public sector companies. Like if you talk about this aviation sector, you can see that Air India was there, railways is still there, no other private firm is there, banks were government banks, insurance sector there was LIC. So everything was being controlled by the government. Even there were some government companies which were established, and the private sector was not allowed to enter into such kind of fields. Okay, So why was such kind of thinking was there? So along with the need of develop industry as an epic center of growth, the planners and the politicians also realized that the process of the industrialization could not be left to the market forces of the supply and demand. Also, it cannot be left to the wisdom of private entrepreneurs. Direct participation of the state was considered essential in the view of following factor. So why this government was interfering in between? Because they don't want these private players to be free and completely. It should not be like the market should be in the hands of the private players upon the demand and supply forces, because they could have manipulated in a different way. So the government was interfering at that time. Because what happens, see, private firms always try to maximize their profit and they don't consider the other factors. Their profit maximization is the only thing which they want. Now the first point here is the lack of capital. See, Industrial Development Bank in India needed a big push, implying the large amount of capital expenditure. At the time of independence, Tata and Birla were the only established industrial house in India. The requirement of capital for the country's industrial growth was far beyond the capacity of those industrial houses. So accordingly, it became essential for the state or the government to achieve industrial growth through public sector undertaking. So at that time, the condition was there was they wanted to do this industrialization, but the capital was not there. And for establishing industry, you need or require huge capital expenditure for that time. But at the time of independence, what was the condition of India? Only Tatas and Birlas were doing this business, and they were considered as the big houses at that point of time. So this capital requirement which was needed at that time for industrial growth was not there, because already it was beyond the capacity of these industrial houses. Means all these industrial houses were not able to cater all this kind of things. So what government decided, that they will have to interfere into this capital scenario. For that, they will be making some other institution as well, which will be supporting each and every industrialization. And for the purpose of that, they also set up like IFCI, IDBI later on to remove this problem of lack of capital. But capital was also like the private players, if they would come into play, they will take out the advantage. But the government wanted to keep everything along with its own companies, government companies, so that the welfare could be there. So that was the first reason why the government was involving in these issues. Now the second point is low inducement to invest. Now here, the low inducement to invest means what the private sector lacked inducement to invest. It was owing to the limited size of the market. Limited size of the market was owing to the low level of demand. Level of demand was low because of the low income. So what happened? See, at that time the private companies, they were having low inducement to invest, because what happened, they were not having enough capital to invest in the company and do the production and all. So who has to come forward here? So government realized that only chance for a big push of this investment, that the public sector or companies will have to come up. So only a big push of public investment could break this vicious circle. Because what happens here in this flow chart, when low income is there, low demand is there. So and market is also not big, means too many buyers are not there. And so who will like to invest? No other company would like to invest in this scene. So there will be low investment, there will be low income. So what they thought, that for this they will have to need some this kind of public investment, and for that we will have to come up the public enterprises. The government company can come and they will have to invest and improve the conditions in India. Then the growth and social justice. Okay, so the government realized that this objective would be achieved only through the direct participation of the state in the process of industrialization, because it requires investment that generates employment rather than investment maximizes profit. So what is the welfare? See, growth with social justice means growth. If the growth is going on, suppose every company is purchasing the machinery and they are going for a huge amount of production, then definitely the GDP will rise. But the social justice will not be there. The people will not get the employment. So here the first thing we should look out for, that there should be some growth in terms of employment also in the country, and not the focus should not be on the only on the profit maximization. Okay, so concentration of the wealth was to be discouraged and the public investment rather than the private investment. now was considered as the best mean to achieve it. So what they were thinking about that there was need some welfare, and because of this, if the private companies will be there, what will happen, they will accumulate all the wealth. And here was at that time was the condition of India. There was just main thing was the focus on the welfare. There should be more welfare to improve the conditions of the people in India. So they were just looking for this public investment, and they just don't want this private investment to happen. They're focusing on this public investment, means government company will do the investment, not the private players. Now, IPR 1956 Industrial Policy Resolution. What is this thing? See, there was kind of thing. There was a policy which was called as the 1956. Okay, so IPR 1956 nothing but it's a declaration on the leading role of the state. Means the government is going to do something in this process of industrialization. So they came out with this policy which came to be known as this Industrial Policy Resolution, or in short we can call it IPR. Now, Industrial Policy Resolution was a clear declaration of the government on the leading role of the government in the process of industrialization. The resolution laid a roadmap on the second 5 year plan. So, as I told you, in the second 5 year plan, these were focusing on the industrialization. At that time, this policy came into play. Okay, so what they want the growth and the social justice. Means growth they wanted definitely, but the social welfare should also be there. Now, what are the main point of it? So there was the threefold classification of industries. Means what? See, the industries were classified into three categories. They were divided into three parts. So those which were established and developed exclusively for the public sector enterprise, these include atomic energy, defense, and railway. Now these atomic energy, defense, and are very critical things. So these were completely in the hands of the government. Now those which could be reestablished both by the private and the public sector, as like in this atomic energy and here this defense, we cannot give this in the hand of the private players or private businessmen. These are critical issues. But here there will be some industry like which can be given in the hand of the public, means private companies, and government can also be in that sector like chemical manufacturing. So government companies also there, private companies are also there. So, however, the private sector was to play only a secondary role. So, new enterprises were to be established primarily in the public sector. This category includes fertilizer industry, mining industry, etc. So, these were the industry where both the private and the public sector were allowed. Then after this, the third category was all the other in the categories were left to the public sector. So all the public sector sorry, private sector was where there was no critical issues like manufacturing of biscuits or maybe some chocolates, confectionaries and all. So this is not of a critical issue. This is not a chemical or a drug or some kind of dangerous substance like nuclear or atomic energy, ordinance means weapons and all. So this is not like that. So these were opened for this private sector, and private sector can do business in such kind of sector. So this was the first thing. Then the next point is industrial licensing. So this licensing was also very critical for the private sector at that time. So private sector could be established only when they get license from the government. Okay. So the basic idea was for this policy was just to encourage industry in the backward region of the country. This was to promote regional quality. Suppose if you want to establish your company somewhere, so they will give you license for establishment of your company in the rural area very easily. But if you want to establish your company in a metropolitan city, then your license will be very hard to get. So this was the kind of condition at that time. In this IPR, they were doing like this. So this license was needed not only for establishing new enterprise but also for expanding production capacity of the existing ones. Now, if you try to expand your production capacity, for that also you required a license. So this was to regulate the allocation of the resources to different use. The focus was to promote the social welfare rather than private profits. So at that time they were simply doing this because what they want, they simply wanted that the control thing should be in the control of the public sector, not on the private sector. Even they imposed this control on the cost also, which is not mentioned here in this book. So cost also, suppose if you're selling at 10 rupees, okay, then government would be able to sell at 8 rupees, and if you try to drop your price to 5 rupees, then definitely you can get profit. But the government tells you, or it is going to tell you, that you cannot keep its prices below the government prices. You will have to keep your prices at a higher bar. So this was another thing, because government was just trying to show that they are selling at a lower cost than the private companies. Then the third point is industrial concession. Concessions means in terms of tax holidays. So here the industrial concessions were given. So the private entrepreneurs were offered many types of concessions. Okay, so what concession means? Maybe in terms of tax they were giving some kind of concessions, and subsidies on the power supply means some part of the expenses will be given by the government and some will be contributed by the private players. So this is how, like, we can see this example through the help of this place in near Indore. It is called as Pithampur. So they are having both the tax holidays, means you'll be we will have to pay very less taxes and subsidy on this power supply also. So why they are giving such kind of things to the private players? Simply so that the entrepreneurs will come up, they will set up their industry, and due to their industry many people will get the job. Okay, so they're just trying to develop that region. Like Pithampur was a barren land, there was no proper cultivation, or crops were could not be grown over there. To develop for development of that region, what they did, they declared it as a SEZ, special economic zone, where the companies can come, they can get advantage of taxes and subsidies, and it will be good for the companies and the businessmen also. So they were having some interest in it. Now we can see that this place Pithampur has grown a lot nowadays, and there are a lot of companies over there. So this is how we can see that a place like where there was no opportunity, even that place was improved. So there were many SEZ in our country which were declared by the government, where the company can come. This was simply done to encourage or just to develop the regional growth in India. Now, the development of the small scale industries. So, what is this? See, there are basically three typical characteristics of SSI. Maybe the question can come, what are the characteristics of this small scale industry? So, why this so much promotion was given to this small scale industry? So we can read it from here. A small scale industry is presently defined as the one whose investment does not exceed more than 5 crore. Means these are small companies or small type of industries. At the beginning of the planning 1951, it was defined as the one whose investment did not exceed in the more than 5 lakhs. So in the old books you will find this figure as 5 lakh. Today it is 5 crore. It has been changed. Okay, due to this industrial inflation and all, the inflation they have adjusted these figures. Now, the role of small scale industry in achieving the goal of the planning was underlined by the Karve Committee, also called the Village and Small Industrial Committee 1955. Now, for this development of this small scale, they made a Karve Committee. So, this purpose of this committee was to develop this small scale industry in the village, so that the people coming from this rural area, they will try to get some employment in their own region only. Okay, now it underlines the significance of the small scale in the terms of three principal characteristics. So, what are the three characteristics? See, why they were focusing so much on this small scale? इतना ज़्यादा focus क्यों था? So, the first thing, SSI is a labor intensive and employment friendly. So, when this type of industry will be established, what will happen? They will be providing or taking help of the peoples, mean labor they are going to hire, and they will be working manually in the companies, because this small scale industry are like this only. Like you can see in the picture, there are some machine, and these people are making clothes. So this is a small scale industry. Basically manpower is required and not too much of machinery. Okay, now here it is also employment friendly. Why? Because see, when you are definitely referring to this labor, definitely you're trying to give the employment to the people. So this type of industry, they just focus on the manpower and not on the machinery. So capital intensive technique is not used in such kind of industry. Okay, so small scale industry is generally considered to be the labor intensive, while large scale industry is a capital intensive industry. To produce a given output, small scale is expected to use more labor than the capital. So the same thing I told you. Now, after this, what happens to the second one? Second characteristic, SI shows location flexibility, means it is very easy to locate them at any place in India, even in the rural areas. There is no necessary need to establish it in the urban or main metropolitan city only. They can be adjusted, go anywhere. Okay, and because this investment will also be less in such kind of small scale industry. So like large scale industry like Bhilai steel and Rourkela steel plant is often established close to the source of raw material. Okay, this is because raw material requirement of the large scale is very huge and the transportation cost will also be very high. So what happens if when you try to establish a big company, you always try to go close to the source of raw material. Like in Bhilai power steel plant, it is located in Chhattisgarh, so the coal areas are there nearby, so the transportation cost will be less, and when they will be manufacturing their articles or goods, the cost of that will also be low. But this is not the case of small scale enterprises. It is it can be located very easily because neither the too much of raw material is required, so transportation cost is very less in small scale industry, and they can easily be set up at any place, means they are flexible. In this scenario, they can be established at any place. So SSI on the other hand shows location flexibility. It is therefore equally equality oriented contribution to the balanced regional growth. So by the establishment of this small scale industry, we can improve the condition even of any area, like any urban area or any rural area. We can establish this type of industry, nothing but a small scale industry, and we can improve that area. So that was another focus of the government. Now, SSI need a small investment. We know this is a small company, it needs a small amount of investment, and therefore it is equity oriented. Okay, so let us read. See, SSI needed is much smaller investment compared to the large industry. Accordingly, it does not lead concentration of economic power, rather than promotes equality across different sections of the society. So, see, it is not a big company. Too much profits are not going to happen. Too much accumulation of profit is not going to happen. There will be no monopoly created because of this kind of industry. So, what they can do, they can freely establish such kind of industry. So, this is a very important characteristic that you can establish it anywhere. No monopoly will be created by this small scale industry, and they will be working definitely. Welfare will also be happening too, because in terms of employment and income generation will be there for the backward regions in India. Now, what are the salient features of the strategy of industrial growth? So, the features was during this industrial growth between this 1950 and 1990. So there will be some good and bad effects which you're going to learn here. Okay, the first effect is the public enterprises were to play a main role in the process of industrialization. So कौन सी company पहले आएगी? The public company, means the government company, is going to come forward, and less opportunity were there for private companies. Second, private enterprises were to play a secondary role in the process of industrialization than that too much permit license Raj. It was a system under which private entrepreneurs were obtain a license for the industrial establishment, and in most of the cases were to produce the goods within the legally prescribed limit of the production capacity. This thing I was telling you, if you are having a very huge capacity in your company, then also the government will be not permitting you or granting license to produce more, because if you produce more, your cost will come down, and government never wanted that, because you can do profit maximization. So what are the thinking of government, that if your even your production capacity is high, they will not let you produce that much of amount of goods. So this was another thing that they were not providing this license. Today they are providing, because that time between this 1950 and 1990, that was the critical time. At that time we just began on the track of this growth, and the thinking of the government was to focus on just on private sector, no, on the public sector companies, and not on the private sector companies. The third point says the process of industrialization focused on import substitution, implying that the production of such goods were to be accorded a high priority which are imported from the rest of the world. So this is called as import substitution effect. So import substitution, why they were trying to focus on this thing? Because whatever you are importing from the other countries should be made in India only, so that there will be no need to import that good from the other parts of the world. And because whenever you import something, you'll have to pay them in dollars, which is not good. So what they were thinking, that they will have to produce all those articles which are been imported in India only. So it will be thinking like it will be a self reliance for India, then that we should not develop on the other economies of the world. So we are trying to produce on our own. Okay, then the fourth, as far as possible, domestic industries were to be protected from the foreign competition. Okay, so see what happens nowadays. We can see a lot of foreign companies in India, but what was the condition at that time? So there was a protection given to the industries which are there in India. How? There was heavy duty on the imports. Okay, so whatever the goods are imported, so the incoming of those goods in India were restricted by the help of imposing a heavy taxes on those goods. So whenever those goods will enter into India, it will be sold in India at a very high price. So this was a problem for them. Then the fixation of import quotas. It was realized that the protection would foster the growth of domestic industry. So what is import quota means? See, if you are if the government is telling you that you can only import 100 crore of gold, not more than that. So what is this? You cannot import more gold from other economies of more than 100 करोड़. अगर 100 करोड़ से ज़्यादा आपने मंगाया तो अलाउड नहीं रहेगा. Okay, so this is a quota, and because of the restriction, what you have to do, you'll have to make that gold in India only now. So just like into after this year 2008, the gold prices rushed from 16,000, 18,000 to 34,000. So at that time the government also just came out with this policy that you cannot import more gold in India. You can import only an amount of 100 crore or 200 crore. So this is a quota. After that you will have to make that gold in India only. So this was the another thing. Then the large scale industry was to be developed with the view to build infrastructure base in India. So large scale industry means there will be some industry in India like which will be producing something at a very large scale, like iron steel industry, which serve as a base. When iron steel industry will grow in India, what will happen? All the machinery are made of this iron or steel only. So there it's just like when this iron steel industry will develop, that will be serving as a base for other industry, because once this iron steel is into the market, we can make the other machinery by the use of that iron and steel, and we can help in the growth of the other sectors, like any industry like paper industry or some chemical industry, because machinery are required there also, which will be made up of iron and steel, and which will be depending on the base. And what will be the base? Like iron steel industry, the industry which will be manufacturing iron and steel in India. Then the last is small scale industry was to be developed with a view to achieving the objectives of employment and equity. The last point is definitely based on small scale. When they will be there will be lot of employment opportunity along with equity, means all the areas they are going to develop. So this was your chapter fourth, was small one. So just go through it, and in case of any doubt you can ask me. Thank you.